Well, hello everyone. Welcome to today's Tuesday Talks. This is a big change for today that I made. I've been planning on this to really kind of do this in January, but just made the decision today to take these Tuesday Talks, which I've been doing every Tuesday since, June, and take it not just inside the Bible Life community, but also just broadly. To some of you are watching this on Facebook, some of you are watching this on YouTube, some of you are watching a replay. Remember, if you are on my either the Inside the Bible Life community Facebook group, or you are on my Facebook page, make sure you go to StreamYard.com/Facebook to give permission so that I can see your comments. And my guest, who I'm about to introduce you to, can see your comments. We can interact with you, and we can see your name, and rather than just the blank gray profile that says Facebook user. So, and if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure that you subscribe to the channel so that you are notified again when we go live. So if you are watching this live, type a comment, let us know where you are coming from here. But normally this has been Inside the Bible Life community, which is my monthly online Bible study live, my membership, where I write a new Bible study. We do these Tuesday Talks. I do live teaching on Mondays, all that. I'll tell you more about that at the end. But right now, I would like to welcome David Rausch, my friend, founder of Go Curriculum, and the most insane hiker I know personally. I know there's some people that who
of course,
do more than you do.
Yeah, but there's way more insane people out there than me.
So David, thank you for joining us. Okay, we got somebody here from Fort Myers, Florida, watching live. Thank you, Rita. Welcome. Watching on YouTube. And so, David, where are you calling in from? And tell us a little bit about that amazing family.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
We're in St. Louis, Missouri. Born and raised in St. Louis, lived in Chicago for a time, but we've been back here in St. Louis for now about 10 or 11 years. I have a wife named Mindy who is absolutely awesome, and we have three incredible kids, Kennedy, Lorelei, and Lincoln. They are a senior in high school, a sophomore in high school, and a seventh grader. So they're now getting a little bit older.
Right. So we've talked about how you and I have a lot in common. We both married up.
That's right. We definitely did.
Both have three kids, and our kids are right about the same age. So if yours are just slightly more condensed. Our youngest are both seventh graders, but we've got a freshman in college while you've got a senior in high school. So,
yeah, right. We're navigating all of that, the fun stuff of sending the first one off to college and the applications and figuring out the finances and all that fun stuff. That's all happening right now. Right.
So here on the Tuesday Talks, we're going to dive into, we talk about all things Bible. And so for you've got your career, which
that's right,
has a lot about Bible. And then we kind of have how you have uniquely, one element of how you've uniquely discipled your own kids. So just so people who have never met you before kind of get an idea of what the vocationally Bible related stuff you do. Give us an overview of that.
Yeah. So I've been in children's ministry now for over 20 years. In fact, after 20 years, I just stopped counting because it started to make me feel really old. So I just tell people more than 20 years. And then about 7 years ago, just got the loudest, clearest, most obnoxious calling from God to walk away from sort of my church job and to start a curriculum company. And so that's what we did 7 years ago. And now we develop children's ministry training and resources. We have a curriculum called Go Curriculum for preschool and for elementary kids. And that has, ever since it started, it started out as this tiny little thing. And it was awesome because every day we had to trust God that he was just going to grow it and then it was going to continue. And I mean, he has been faithful every step of the way. And now 6-7 years later, I mean, it is going in full force. And it's my full-time vocation and then some.
Right.
So things are going great with Go Curriculum.
Yeah, and I remember, I mean, because you and I have known each other kind of since that.
That's right, through the children's ministry circles, through conferences. Yeah,
whether it be at the Children's Ministry Expo, which was what used to be around the corner from you,
exactly,
and, or through CPC or some of the other different conferences that we would stand at booths together and then go eat a lot of food late at night.
Right. Yeah, those were awesome days too.
Yeah, you usually having to do with either nachos or some sort of barbecue.
Yeah.
So we both have similar passions in that, and I just, some people don't, they see the mature product, or they see a business that's humming along, and they don't see some of the struggle that goes in that, and the combination. I mean, we weren't planning to talk about this, but as you even shared that a clear calling does not mean clear, wide open pathways and ease of happening.
That is absolutely true. But I'll tell you what, there have been very few things that I've ever done in my life that helped form my faith as much as following God's calling into this new company, this new vocation. Because like I was saying before, every day I had to trust God's provision. And I mean, I can tell you story after story where it was like we were down to our last dime. Mm-hmm. You hear these stories sometimes, but we were living this. We were down to the last dollar. And, I would go out for a hike, which, I mean, is one of my things. It's how I process. It's how I pray. It's how I think. It's, how I create. I walk and I walk and I walk, and I'd be out on these hikes and just praying and saying, telling God almost as if he didn't know, like, hey, we're down to the last dollar. I don't know how we're going to continue doing this, for another week, let alone another month or year. And within 24 hours, unsolicited, we would have somebody who would just graciously donate obscene amounts of money to help us continue doing what we're doing. And I would think, oh my goodness, I mean, how faithful God has been to us through this whole thing. It has been an absolute adventure the whole time.
Yeah. And I remember having some of those conversations with you early on when you were like, well, we feel like we're supposed to do this, and we think we can give it another 6 months and see, and then, we'll do another 6 months, and we'll do another, and then, we think we could do another year. And then just, I mean, it was so, for me, as somebody who has kind of seen this from, I think we probably met when Go was 6 months old or a year old or something like that. But it was something that I think going from those early conversations of feeling a clear calling and navigating very real struggles.
Yeah.
To being able to sit in your home earlier this year and hear just kind of about how in the midst of a pandemic and in the midst of some of the craziness, some of the ideas that God birthed in you for that, and the work that you and Mindy did, just how Go has reached more people than
it really has. I mean, I think God uniquely positioned us in this place so that when the pandemic hit, we could do some things that maybe bigger publishing companies who have been around for literally, some of them upwards of 100 years, couldn't do because of their size. Because we were smaller, we could pivot that a lot more quickly and create things that churches could use through that pandemic, and they could send home to their families. So it was really cool to see how God used us during that season. But I'll tell you, one of the biggest challenges for me personally in my faith journey is that in the early years of the company, like you were saying, like we trusted God because we had no other choice. I mean, really, it was like every day it was hand to mouth, and we were trying to figure out how we were going to keep on doing this. And now that we have grown as a company and we're not living, day to day, and we're not having to figure out from month to month where the money is going to come from, it is easier to fall back in this mentality of like, okay, God, thanks for getting us here. But we've got it from here.
Right.
You were really faithful through those years. But now we're big enough. Now we know what we're doing. Now we have enough money in the bank account where, we don't have to depend on you from day to day. And I've never really had that thought outright, but it's just easy to kind of become comfortable and to just assume that everything is going to keep on keeping on the way that it has been. Yeah, I mean, there is something. I would never wish those early years on anyone. I mean, the amount of anxiety that I had. I remember laying down in bed at night and sometimes feeling like I had this, like a mass, like there was this ball in my chest that I would have to pray away, and I would have to keep reminding myself, look, trust God. He has got this. I would never wish that feeling really on anyone, but there was so much growth in that. I mean, there was so much faith development, feeling like I was in the fire. I don't desire to be in the fire. I don't wish for anyone else to be in the fire, but the fire is so good. Like it refines you. It forces you to grow. And so I've learned that. I've learned how, being comfortable is nice. I like it, but it doesn't help me. Being comfortable doesn't force me to grow, really.
Yeah, I have a friend of mine that years ago said something in the midst of kind of something I was struggling through, probably early years of ministry, honestly. And he just said, "You do realize that God is more concerned with your character than your comfort, right?"
Right.
Yeah,
like, it's so true.
Yeah, thanks so much. I think that's going to leave a mark.
Yeah, right.
So now shifting gears a little bit, because I think you and I could talk family ministry and curriculum and all that and technology. We could talk all that for a long, long time. But something I learned about you early on is that you and I both really, really enjoy hiking. But compared to you, I hate hiking. Like if somebody actually saw how we lived out our hiking, and I said, "Oh yeah, I really like hiking and backpacking," and you said, "Oh yeah, I really like hiking and backpacking," and then they looked at how we lived that out, they would say, "You hate hiking."
Yeah.
So when I tell people that you love backpacking and love hiking, give a ballpark idea of how many miles a year you hike.
Oh, well, I've never really done the math, but many hundreds, maybe even upwards, again, depending on the year, maybe even upwards of 1,000 miles a year. And most of that happens just from day to day. I will do some longer trips on any given year that might be into the hundreds of miles per trip. But a lot of those miles are just me going out day after day, like yesterday and the day before and the day before that. I just go and I hit the trails that are right down the street from me. And I mean, really, that's how I decompress. And that's where, I connect with God and I just think and I just get away from things. That's just a part of my DNA.
Yeah. And so I hope that those of you that are watching that heard that you said hundreds of miles.
Yeah, right.
Several hundreds of miles per year. So if you think of, okay, I'm doing a 10-mile hike. Well, a 10-mile hike to get to the place where 100 turns into hundreds, you've got to do 20 10-mile hikes in a year to get to the place where the 100 has an S on the end, and you're doing multiples of that.
That's true, but it even makes me think, people, when it comes to any big goal, whether it's Bible reading or it's hiking, I mean, how do you hike 1,000 miles in a year? Well, I mean, you get out on a daily basis and you hike 5 miles.
Right.
And before you know it, you will have hiked a very long way, which it's the same way whether you have a big goal like that for the year, or again, like I said, with some of these trips that I'll go on, it'll be 200, 300 miles that we'll do in a stretch. And you wake up every day, you put one foot in front of the other. And before you know it, you have hiked a long way.
Right. And so speaking of kind of where I want to bring this full circle is you've done something with each of your kids, the third kid being this summer.
Yeah, right.
That is something I've never heard of another family doing. And you've really seen it from a kind of weaving in lessons about God and the Bible and discipleship and how you've raised your kids. So tell us about this journey that you take your kids on when they turn 13 and even how you got the idea to do it.
Yeah. So I have basically forced my kids into my hiking insanity is what I've done. Now, I heard someone say long ago when my kids were all young, they had talked about when each of their kids turned 13, they took them on some sort of a special trip. And, the guy that I heard talking about this, it wasn't a hiking trip, but I remember hearing that and thinking, oh man, I want to do that with my kids. When each of them turns 13, I just want to spend that special time with them. And so, of course, since outdoor adventure and hiking, that's so close to my heart, I instantly thought that's what we're going to do. When they turn 13, I'm going to take each of my kids on some sort of big outdoor adventure. And originally, sort of the size and scope of that adventure was actually fairly small. I kind of thought we'll go for a week and we'll go out to some sort of national park somewhere and we'll spend the week just kind of hiking around a little bit each day. And when my oldest daughter, the year before she turned 13, I on my own, I hiked the John Muir Trail by myself. The John Muir Trail is in California. It goes through the Sierra Nevada mountains. The official length of the trail is 211 miles, but altogether, when you've hiked out to resupply and you hike in to get to the trail and all this stuff, usually it comes out to about 250 miles. And so I did the John Muir Trail through the Sierra Nevada mountains from Mount Whitney in the southernmost portion all the way up to Yosemite National Park. And it was life-changing. I mean, I absolutely loved it. And so after I had done that, I kind of thought to myself, you know what? This is what I should do with my kids. I should take each one of them on the John Muir Trail from beginning to end. We're going to do the entire 211 miles plus, and we're going to spend 3 weeks. That's how long about how long it takes to do the John Muir Trail. And so that's what I did with each of them. When each of them turned 13, I would take just that kid. And so for my oldest daughter, Kennedy, we did the entire trail, and my wife joined us for the last week. With my middle daughter, Lorelei, we did the entire trail, and then the last week, my oldest daughter and wife joined us. And then this last summer, when I did it with my son, all three of them joined us. My two daughters and wife joined us for the last week of it, the last about 60 miles. And we all finished the whole thing together in Yosemite National Park. And so that was a special moment. I mean, because that was sort of like a culmination of 6 years of dreaming and planning and hiking with the kids that all of us in the end would finish together. And so, yeah, that picture right there, that is the trail sign at the very end in Yellowstone. And you can even see it says John Muir Trail, 211 miles. That's all the way to get to Mount Whitney. And so this was the culmination of all of those years and all of that hiking. That's my oldest daughter on the right, Kennedy. That's my middle daughter on the left. That's Lorelei. And then my youngest son right there. And so, yeah, that trip right there, that was my son and I, and then daughters and wife joined us for the very end there. But it was, if anyone is listening to this and thinking that's insane, a 13-year-old, 211 miles. And let me tell you, this is These are 211 of the hardest miles you will find in this country. These are not flat miles. These are not easy miles. These are incredibly mountainous miles. Over the course of this whole thing, I think there's upwards of 58,000 total elevation gain and loss. I mean, you constantly are climbing and then descending and then climbing and then descending. There are 11 mountain passes over the course of the 211 miles. And Mount Whitney itself, the southernmost point of the trail, it is the tallest point in the lower 48 states. It's 14,505 feet to the top of Mount Whitney. And so this is a serious climb. These are hard miles that my kids were doing. And so people hear it and they think that's crazy. And they're not wrong.
They're not. I was going to say, you said if somebody's watching this and they think it's crazy, how about if someone's interviewing you and thinks you're
Yeah, right. I have people who will talk to me and say, I want to do this with my kids. And I'll say, okay, pause, hold on. First, you have to understand this was not an easy thing to do. First of all, it wasn't easy for me personally, physically to do it, but then to lead a young kid through the whole thing is an incredible challenge. But this, I'll never forget this. Prior to doing this with my oldest daughter, okay, so at this point, none of my kids had done this before. And we're planning and we're talking about it. And I can tell she's starting to get a little bit anxious about this whole idea. And my whole family, we were driving one day, probably a month before we left on the trip. And we're driving down here in Missouri. We have the Ozark Mountains. Okay, the Ozark Mountains are not mountains. They're medium-sized hills. And we weren't even in the medium-sized hills. We were in the foothills of the Ozarks. So they're pretty small hills. And we're driving, and my oldest daughter points out the window and says, "Hey, Dad, are we going to have to climb anything that big?" And my wife and I just looked at each other, and we were like, oh, no. She has no idea what she is in store for here. And so after that, I started talking to her and saying, hey, look, we're going to be climbing some pretty big stuff and we're going a long way. This is not going to be easy. And what I would tell her over and over, I would say to her, this is not a vacation.
Right.
This is an adventure. Okay. It's going to be at times really hard. We are going to have these heavy packs. We're going to be hiking long days. You're going to get dirty. You're going to be tired. There's going to be points at which you do not want to go any farther, but we don't have a choice. We have to keep going because at some point we're going to run out of food. We've got to keep on getting to these resupply points where we have shipped food ahead of time and we're going to pick that up. But we only have so many days of food on us. And so we have to keep on going. And so there's not really a choice, but this is going to be awesome. And I think I told her that actually one too many times, because at one point at the dinner table, I'm telling her this again. I'm giving this is not a vacation. This is an adventure speech. And she just broke down in tears. And I was like, oh, okay. Don't worry though. You're going to do great. This is going to be fun. This is all going to be wonderful. But you know what though? This has informed kind of how I approach even walking my kids towards Jesus, because I think that's one of the problems with the way that we talk to kids about being a follower of Jesus. And actually, even it's a problem with the way that we think about being a Christian. Is we think about it in terms of we think it's going to be a vacation. We don't see following Jesus as an adventure. We see it as a vacation. And so we take the easy route. We think this should be easy. Because I don't know about you, but when I go on a true vacation, not one of these adventures, but an actual vacation, I don't do things that I don't want to do.
Right.
I do things when I want to do them. I do the easy things. I do the relaxing things. And I think too many of us have sort of started to believe that that's what that's what following Jesus should be like. We read the Bible when we want to read the Bible, when it's convenient to read the Bible. We follow Jesus when it's easy to follow Jesus. We go to church when our schedule allows for us to go to church. And if there's some sort of a conflict, then we don't do it. But that's not really how following Jesus was intended to be. Following Jesus is an adventure. It is. And there were times plenty of times on these trips with the kids where I didn't want to hike any farther. And I know the kids didn't want to hike any farther. In fact, my middle daughter, she was the hardest to get through. I mean, she's the most stubborn of the bunch. But I remember at the beginning of day two, we still had like 200 plus miles to go. We got our packs on at the beginning of the day, and I turned and I looked at her, and she was just in tears. I mean, she was sobbing, and I went over to her and I said, "Lorelei, what's going on? What's wrong?" And she just said, "I can't do this. I'm not going to make it. I can't go any farther. I just want to go home." And I pointed, down the trail in the direction we were going. I said, "Home is that way. We have to keep on. You can do this." Just encouraging her, helping her to believe in herself. And there's times in our walk with Jesus that's how it feels. It's like, I can't do this. I can't go any farther. But I know with my kids, I want to prepare them for the idea that being a follower of Jesus is not always going to be easy. In fact, oftentimes it is not going to be easy, and you're not going to want to do these things. But one step in front of the other, we continue to follow him, and we continue to pursue him. And part of it too is seeing this as like, we had a very real goal. Like, we had a very real destination on these trips. And so we were constantly headed in that direction. And again, when it comes to our walk with Jesus, I mean, I think a lot of times for me and for a lot of people, they don't know what that end destination is. They don't know what that end goal is. Why am I putting one foot in front of the other? Where am I headed? And so sometimes it's a matter of keeping that end destination, that prize, that goal of following Jesus and being with Jesus for eternity, to keep that in mind. And that gives us that destination that we are continually walking towards, even when we're tired, even when we don't want to take that next step, that we just keep on doing it.
Yeah. And so when you think of, that lesson of even how that has taught you about, following Jesus and leading your kids toward Jesus, there are the fun, amazing, awe-inspiring, worship-inducing experiences, and there are
those mountaintop experiences,
and we get blisters, and we struggle, and we do some things because we just need to do some things. What would you say? Like the conversation, now granted, with Lincoln, you're only a few, you're only a few, months removed from it. But even in processing with him over the last few months and with your daughters over the last few years, what do you feel like comes up in conversation about the lessons that you've learned from that, or what the big memories, the big takeaways are, even months or years down the road for your kids?
Yeah, well, there's a few things that I have in mind. Even just as you were talking, I'm thinking, I post pictures and stories about these adventures with my kids primarily on Facebook, but then on Instagram as well. And I know people see those pictures, and they're beautiful pictures. The Sierra Nevada mountains are beyond gorgeous. I mean, the snow-capped mountains and the waterfalls and the rivers, and it is beyond gorgeous. And so people see these pictures and they think, "Oh my, I want this. I want to do what you're doing." And I have to remind people too, like, hey, this is the Instagram version of this trip. It looks beautiful, doesn't it? It's really easy to sit at home and to look at the pictures and to read the descriptions, but you don't realize all of the literal blood, sweat, and tears that went into this. Like literally all three of those things: blood and sweat and tears, in abundance. Every day there are those things, and you mentioned the blisters. So it's really, it's easy to look at it on Instagram and think, oh, this is fun, and this is easy. It is fun at times. It is oftentimes not easy, but I think that's sort of, sometimes that's the picture that we give other people about what it means to follow Jesus. We're always putting forth the pretty picture, whether it's online or even in person. You got that smile, and you got, how are you doing? Like, oh, I'm doing great. And it's not often that we kind of throw open that curtain and let people see, no, there's a struggle. Following Jesus is not easy. And there is the blood and the sweat and the tears when it comes to following Jesus. And so as our kids grow up and they start to realize that following Jesus isn't easy, I think a lot of times they go, wait a second, this doesn't seem right. There's something wrong. I have to be doing it wrong. It's not supposed to be this hard. I'm not supposed to be getting blisters while I walk towards Jesus. But the truth is that yes, you will get blisters. There will be the blood, the sweat, and the tears. And I don't think that we prepare, especially our kids, we don't prepare them for that. And so that's one of the things that I took away from this, is that my kids really do need to understand that following Jesus, at times, it is that mountaintop experience, and there is the awe, and there is the wonder, and there is the beauty. And a lot of times there is the blisters, and there are the tears, and there's the sweat that goes into the whole thing. And you have both of those. I was about to say both of those in equal measures. But I mean, in terms, like even on the trail, hiking, honestly, there's a lot more of the blood, sweat, and the tears than there are the mountaintop experiences. That's the cost of it. You have to put in the blood, sweat, and tears to get those mountaintop experiences. And I think sometimes it can be the same following Jesus. I mean, a lot of times you might have more of the blood, sweat, and tears than you will have the mountaintop experiences, but that's okay. You keep on putting one foot in front of the other, and you keep on walking towards him. And that's important to teach our kids that, and to teach anyone that. But I think another one of the things that kind of came out of it that was so important for my kids is that they learned that they were capable of so much more than they believed they were able to do. I mean, when you're standing at the bottom of, for example, Forester Pass, which, depending on which direction you're going in, that's on about day 3 or 4 out of 21. So you're early in to the trip, and you've got to climb a pass that tops out at 13,200 feet. It's the highest pass on the John Muir Trail. And I'm telling you, it is a climb. All day long, you climb, and then you keep climbing, and then you keep climbing. And I remember with my oldest daughter, Kennedy, how many tears there were headed up Forester Pass. And at one point, she just stopped. And it was just like, I can't do this. I can't go any farther. And so you stop, and you eat a little bit of food, and you drink some water, and you take a breather, and you encourage them forward, and you stand up, and you break it down into small pieces. You say, hey, forget this idea of getting all the way to the top of Forester Pass. We're not even going to talk about that. Let's just get to that rocky outcropping that we can see that's up a little bit further. Let's just go that far, and then we're going to stop. And so we would do that, and we'd get to that rocky outcropping. She'd be like, okay, I still feel good. And you're like, great. Next, let's go get to that switchback right up there that we could see. And so you would break this thing down, and little by little, they would learn that they could take any challenge, no matter how big it is, and break it down into smaller chunks. But then even to break those smaller chunks down into just one step at a time, really, that's what we're called to do, is just to take the next step,
right,
and then the next step. And what's amazing about that, though, is that you could sometimes see the top, and it would look like it was forever away. But when you put your head down and you focus on taking one step at a time, it was always amazing how far you would go in how little time. There were times where you just put your head down and then eventually you'd look up and you'd look back to where you came from and you'd say, oh my goodness, that was just 15 minutes ago. We were forever down that way. And before you knew it, you were at the top. And so my kids came out of this just realizing that they could do far more than they had ever imagined. And I would go so far as to say that this was one of those identity forming experiences, that they were different people on the other end of the trip. And I could watch the transformation over the course of the 3 weeks as they were becoming different people. But the level of confidence that they had at the end of the trip as compared to the beginning was just phenomenal. And I think that's one of the greatest things that they brought out of it. But that, that just makes me realize too, like when it comes to identity, how important that is for my kids. Because again, at the end of this trip, they saw themselves in a different light. They understood themselves to be different people than when they went into that trip. There's this, I came across this a long time ago. There was this study that they did. It was Stanford University, San Diego University, University of Washington, where you're at. They did this study together where they had a group of preschoolers. So this is age 3 through 6-year-olds. And they divided these preschoolers into 2 different groups. And they told both of the groups, they said, you're going to have a chance to play. But before you go and play, we want to talk to you about something. And so with one group, they talked to these preschool kids about helping and why helping is important and the value of helping in different ways that they could help. And so they talked to them about helping, and then they allowed the preschoolers to start playing. And then over the course of their playtime, the adult in the room presented them with 4 opportunities to help. Well, they did the same thing with this other group of kids, but the talk that the other group received wasn't about helping. It was about being helpers in the noun form. And they talked to them about what it means to be a helper and why being a helper is good. And so they gave them that whole talk about helpers. And then they allowed those kids to play and presented them with 4 opportunities to help. And so what they discovered over the course of doing this is that the group that they had talked to about being helpers in the noun form were far more likely to help than the kids who had been talked to about helping. In fact, what they discovered is that the kids who had received the talk about helping were no more likely to help than the control group of kids who had received no talk whatsoever.
Wow.
And so what they kind of discovered through this is the value of identity.
For sure.
That the kids who had been talked to about being helpers, that is an identity. Being a helper is an identity. And when those kids understood themselves to be helpers, their behavior flowed out of that. I think a lot of times in our walk with Jesus and our leading our own kids, our own families in their walk with Jesus, we primarily want them to behave in a certain way. We're looking for the results. We're results-oriented people. And so we tell them, you need to be reading your Bible.
Right.
You need to be praying. You need to be journaling. You need to be doing all of these things that are good for us to do as followers of Jesus. But then what we find out is that only lasts for so long, that you can only behave a certain way for so long if you don't believe yourself to be this person. Sure. And so that's the other thing that I've discovered with my kids is how important it is to help them discover what their identity is in Christ. Because when you start to understand yourself by your identity in Christ, the behavior just is the natural byproduct of that. Sure. You know, and so you even think through scripture. I mean, that's the great thing about the Bible, though, is that we don't even have to wonder what our identity is. Like the Bible tells us, and it gives us lots of identities to even choose from. I mean, child of God, beloved, chosen, royal priesthood, heavenly citizen, friends of Jesus, a new creation in Christ. I mean, it gives us all of these different identities that we can latch onto. And my goodness, when you really start to focus on assuming those identities and believing those identities and understanding yourself to be these things, the outpouring of that is the desire
for sure
to read his word and to pray and to journal and to do all of those things. But it starts with who we are, not what should we be doing.
For sure. I think Dallas Willard refers to that as the gospel of behavior management.
Right. Yeah.
and that when I've taught on the book of Ephesians, I remind people that in the first 3 chapters, the only thing there is to do is to remember. But there are over 30 identity messages in the first 3 chapters. And then 4 through 6 are, okay, this is what your life and your marriage and your parenting and sex and your thought life and your money and your spiritual warfare and prayer. This is what all this should look like if you actually believe yourself to be who I just said that you are in that. And I've said many times, I think that the problem with most of us is we try to live Ephesians 4, 5, 6 lives without first becoming Ephesians 1, 2, 3 people.
Right. Absolutely. So, yeah.
All right. Well, man, this has been awesome. And like I do at the end of these Tuesday talks, I love to just kind of rapid fire a couple random questions. All right.
Yeah.
So one will be on the theme that we've already been talking about. So what is a hike that you've never been on that is on your bucket list of, I've got to do this sometime before I die?
Oh, I have quite a list. That is a long list, but I'll tell you the first one that comes to mind, the Wind Rivers in Wyoming. A lot of people haven't heard of it. It's not an easily accessible trail. If you just want to drive in and do some day hikes, it really is like a serious backpackers kind of a trip, but there's a place called the Wind Rivers in Wyoming. I've done the northern portion of it. I really want to go back and do the southern portion because it is I think it's the closest thing that America has to the Alps. It is absolutely gorgeous mountain scenery.
Okay. All right. So I know that you and I both have a love for barbecue.
Mm-hmm.
So
and St. Louis is famous for its barbecue.
Right. So when it comes to sweet barbecue, smoky barbecue, spicy barbecue, the mustard-based barbecue, or the vinegar-based barbecue.
Oh.
If you could only have one of those for the rest of your life and you could never have the other 4, what would you do?
Easy. And I almost feel like a wimp saying this, you know, because I feel like if you're a serious barbecue eater, then you need to do the smoky. You need to do the spicy. But I am sweet through and through. Give me that sweet, sugary barbecue sauce, and I'll put it on any and everything.
Okay. All right. So last one. It's you, just you and your wife, and you've got not just a date night, but a date weekend. Right? Your kids are all at summer camp. It's a date weekend. What's the perfect date weekend?
Oh, well, this probably shouldn't come as too much of a surprise, but there's probably hiking involved in it. Yeah. So, I mean, I think probably the ideal would be, I want to get away. I want to get out of my house. Let's get in the car. Let's drive not too far. Let's go, you know, like a couple of hours away, find some B&B in some small town where we have some access to some restaurants and a little bit of shopping, but I want to get out and I want to hit some trails. I want to go discover some new beautiful stuff. And fortunately, my wife loves doing that as well. So I wouldn't feel like I was dragging her on that. Yeah.
That's good, because a perfect date weekend that your wife doesn't like,
that is not,
it's probably not going to be in the perfect category. So
no, not at all.
All right, man. Well, So if people want to find out more, going to imdavidrausch.com for your blog. And on Facebook, it's just david.rausch. Go Curriculum is just gocurriculum.com. But
Yes.
that's what that is. And again, this is part of the Bible Life community. I've only done these Tuesday talks inside the Bible Life community, but now these are being streamed live. But the recordings of these and all past ones, if you're interested in checking out the Bible Life community, where I write a brand new Bible study every month and facilitate that in the community, as well as do some live teaching every Monday, do these talks every Tuesday. We have Bible Life community groups where you can discuss the Bible together. If you want to check that out, I want to give you the opportunity to check that out for a couple weeks for $1. So if it's something where you just want to even see, what is this Bible Life thing? You can go to keithfarron.com/tryBibleLife and check that out for $1. But between now and then, if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to subscribe and click that little bell so you know when I do this next Tuesday. If you're watching this on Facebook, then click like and follow. You can even share this. And I look forward to seeing you on the next Tuesday Talks. Thanks so much for joining us. And David, thank you so much for spending this time with us.
Yeah, thank you, Keith.
All right. We'll see you next time on the Tuesday Talks.